Today's workplace is a lot more collaborative and a lot less hierarchical than in the past. Do it because I told you so doesn't really fly anymore. And that's a good thing. But it also means that if you want to get things accomplished and make progress on the metrics that really matter, you have to amp up your persuasion skills. In many cases, you can't simply force someone to do your bidding. You have to persuade them that it's in their own best interest to do so. I'm Dory Clark. I teach for Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, and I'm the author of Reinventing You and Stand Out. Persuasion is about making sure your best ideas get a fair hearing. You owe it to yourself, your company, and the projects you care about to make sure you're doing everything possible, within the bounds of ethics and good sense, to help them succeed. So let's start persuading. Robert Cialdini, the eminent scholar of persuasion, says that one of the best ways to become more persuasive is simple. It's having someone like you. Of course, if you're nice and respectful, that goes a long way. But is there something you can do to increase the chances that someone you meet for the first time is going to like you? It turns out there is. When people meet you, for better or for worse, they unconsciously bucket you very rapidly into an us or a them. If you want to be liked, it's in your interest as soon as possible to find a way to get them to consider you an us. The answer is to find something you have in common with them, which gives you a topic you can talk about and enables them to see what connects with the two of you. It doesn't even have to be a profound similarity. It could be something as simple as what neighborhood you live in, or that you're both dog owners, or that you root for the same sports team. But having some connection, however slight, gives you a basis on which to start to build a relationship. So how do you find that commonality? To start, you'll sometimes have the opportunity to research people in advance. For instance, you probably know who the hiring manager is if you're going in for a job interview, or maybe you're meeting a new colleague or client that's just come on board. You can look them up on LinkedIn or Google them and often find possible lines of inquiry. Maybe you went to the same college, or you're involved with the same charity, or you have a mutual friend. Even at large public events, you can often deploy this strategy effectively. For instance, let's say you're going to a professional association networking mixer. You could research the speaker in advance, so you're prepared with possible commonalities. It's also highly likely that members of the professional association board will be attending, so you could look them up. You don't have to prepare in advance for everyone, but if you've researched a few people beforehand, you'll likely feel more confident if the opportunity to speak with them arises. Even if you haven't had a chance to research someone in advance, you can ask them open-ended questions to try to draw them out and scan for what you have in common. For instance, if you're relatively involved in the organization that's sponsoring the event, you can ask how they ended up at the event. Maybe if they're also pretty involved, or if they were brought by someone you know, there are your points of commonality. Either situation could lead to a good conversation. You can ask them how they spend their time outside work, and you might discover a number of commonalities there, such as having kids the same age or a shared hobby like bicycling or chess or tango. Maybe they're committed to a charitable cause you also care about. Any of these can be a great foundation to build a connection on. In most cases, you can find something to connect with people about. For instance, I was at a cocktail party the other day and struck up a conversation with a stranger, and we discovered we both played squash and were able to have a very good 20-minute chat with that as the jumping-off point. But even if you find nothing in common, don't give up. Almost as good as having something in common is having a genuine interest in the other person. You may not know anything about squash, but you can find an interest in how squash impacts this person's life. Any person you meet, you could probably have a good conversation if you draw on your general cultural literacy. This is where reading the newspaper regularly can come in handy, and your natural curiosity. You can ask how he learned to play squash and where he plays now, or ask his opinion, all squash players like to discuss this, of why the sport isn't more popular in the United States. Check out the exercise file to start brainstorming about possible commonalities. Study after study has shown that you're more likely to be persuasive if people like you. So discover that commonality, or at least ask really good questions, and you'll find yourself far more effective at work too. When it comes to your ability to persuade others, being likable is a great first step. But, of course, it's often not sufficient. You might like your accountant a lot, but you're probably not going to start taking his medical advice, because that's an area where he probably doesn't have a lot of credibility. Hopefully, your goal isn't to get people to take your medical advice unless you're actually a doctor. But let's say you are that accountant. You know finance inside and out, but we live in a world with a lot of accountants, and everyone has an opinion. How can you get others to recognize the true expertise that you do possess? How can you get people to view you as credible so they'll actually listen? Here are 2 things you can do. The first relates to your credentials. If there are external sources that can validate your expertise, make use of that. If you're a CPA, that establishes that you know what you're talking about when it comes to balance sheets. But credentials don't all have to be formal or academic. You can think about symbols of authority that you can tap into. For instance, you could become a board member of your local professional association or start blogging for publications that your colleagues read. Those are highly visible forms of credibility, so when someone meets you, you don't have to prove yourself as much because your affiliations do the heavy lifting for you. The second part, once you have the credentials in place, is making sure, in a non-obnoxious way, that people know about them. Otherwise, it's like a tree falling in the forest. No one knows that credibility is there. There are subtle but useful things you can do which don't require you to brag about yourself. For instance, if you have a degree in your field, like an MBA, or a certification, like being a CPA, hang the diploma on your wall. You're not saying, "I'm so great" or "I'm so smart," but other people who come into contact with you will notice. Another possibility, which persuasion researcher Robert Cialdini recommends, is what I call the email strategy, and it involves sending an email to someone you're going to meet for the first time a few days in advance. You write that in order to make the meeting more productive and efficient, you want to share some background information with regard to whatever topic you're going to be discussing. Then, you can briefly summarize your experience related to that issue. They're highly likely to read that email because it's related to your upcoming meeting, and you're able to enter the room with them knowing all about your experience, so you don't have to say a word. It establishes your credibility even before you've met. One more variation of this, sort of a passive email strategy, is to incorporate some text into your email signature file. For instance, at the bottom of my emails, after my signature, I have a standard line of text that says, "Find out why Stand Out was named the #1 leadership book of 2015 by Inc. magazine," with a link to the book and the article that gave it that ranking. Similarly, if you have an MBA or CPA or anything else along those lines, you could put it in your signature file, Joe Smith, CPA, along with your mailing address and email and phone number. That's not bragging, that's providing information, and others will see it exactly that way. It makes intuitive sense. People are more willing to listen to other people and be influenced by them if they think those people are credible. You're a lot more likely to start exercising after a stern warning from your doctor rather than a stern warning from your mailman. If we want to become more persuasive, then, we need to become more credible, and these strategies will help. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. We've all heard that rather ominous sentiment. But the good news is, it's only partially true. It's not easy to change a first impression. Oftentimes they get locked in and stay that way. But it's not impossible. If you've somehow managed to make a bad first impression, and let's face it, we've all been there are a few things you can do to change the dynamics and get people to take a second look at who you are and what you're capable of. First off, you have to start spending more time with a person you've alienated. That might feel counterintuitive and downright unpleasant because no one loves hanging out with someone who isn't that keen on them. In fact, your natural tendency might be to try to hide from that person and spend less time with them. That's what I've done in the past when I got off on the wrong foot with a colleague, but it's the wrong move. The reason is that people only change their opinion of you when they're forced to. It's cognitive conservation of energy. Unless they have a really good reason to reevaluate their perceptions, they won't. But if you spend more time with them, such as volunteering to serve on a committee with them, it gives them more exposure to you in a favorable light, which is likely to trigger a reevaluation. Next, it's unfortunate, but you're going to need to overcompensate in order to get people to look at you in a different way. For instance, if you started a new job and came in late every day of your first week, it might have been for a very good reason, like your car was in the shop and you had to take the bus and there were unforeseen delays. Someone who knows you and knows that you're reliable would probably ask you about it or give you the benefit of the doubt. But for someone just meeting you, they don't have that context, so their explanation is likely to be, "She's just someone who comes in late." After your car is fixed, for the next month, you might get in on time every day, or even 5 minutes early. But the truth is, that won't be noticed, because it's too subtle for people when their opinions have already hardened. In order to change that narrative, you need to overcompensate. For the next 2 months, get in 30 minutes early every day, or 60 minutes early. That is hitting them hard, with behavior so noticeable, they'll have to start thinking differently about you. Finally, sometimes you have to wait it out and persevere. It can be extremely frustrating when someone just doesn't get you for whatever reason. But sometimes nothing you do is going to work. They have to see over time and with their own eyes that you're different than they had originally imagined. I have one close friend now who actually didn't like me at first because she thought I was too positive and therefore fake. I'm really just positive, but it took several years before she believed that there wasn't some facade I was putting on. It was just me. Now that she gets that, we're actually good friends. So sometimes patience pays off. It is so frustrating when things start off badly with someone, but that doesn't mean the situation can't be remedied. With these strategies, you can begin to turn things around, and in the process, ensure you're far more likely to be able to influence and move that person in a positive way. If you're going to be persuasive, it pays to know where to focus your efforts. I talk about this even more in my course Managing Office Politics, so if you want to go more in depth on how to identify the right people to influence, you can check that out. But for now, here's what you need to know. First, think about the chain of command in your organization. Obviously, your boss is going to be critical here. If you can't persuade him or her about what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's approving a new project or giving you permission to work from home, you're probably not going to have much luck elsewhere. But in order to really understand the reality of the situation, and this is the part that most people don't do, you should take your analysis a step further. Think about who your boss needs to persuade. If she's going to say yes to you, who does she need to justify that to? And what information or reassurances might that person seek? If you can figure that out, not just how to convince your boss, but to make it easy for her to make the case on your behalf up the chain of command, then you're in a strong position. Next, look at where the soft power in your organization lies. That's a term often used in diplomacy to describe indirect power that lies outside the chain of command. Check out the exercise file to help you identify who the real decision makers are. There are often people in an organization who don't have official authority to say yes or no to something, but are nonetheless influential because they've been there a long time and they know how things work, or because they're really talented and everyone respects them, or sometimes because they have the ear of people who officially are in power. Whatever the case, you have to take these folks into account. You need to know who they are and try to understand their motivations. What will their concerns be about whatever it is you're trying to influence, and how can you alleviate them? Sometimes it's as simple as keeping people in the loop so they don't feel blindsided. Other times, they may have a pet issue, and if you can find a way to frame your request so it fits into that worldview, then you're going to have an easier time selling it. For instance, they may be a huge environmentalist, and if you can explain that your proposal about streamlining bureaucratic procedures in the organization will be a huge win for the environment because there's less paper being produced, voila! Finally, a good step to implement now, which paves your way to success in the future, is looking for ways that you can proactively spend more time with these decision makers and influencers. A well-known principle in psychology is what's called the mere exposure effect. It turns out that people will like you more the more time they spend around you. So if you want people to think of you with a positive frame of mind, finding ways to simply be around them more can be extremely beneficial over the long term. Maybe you can volunteer to serve on a committee that they chair, or make an effort to sit next to them at meetings so you can chat for a bit before the session starts and get to know them better. This isn't about blitzing someone all at once, of course. Instead, it's about a long-term strategy to develop relationships with the people who have control over your future, so you're better able to influence those dynamics. Why is no so often the default in corporate life? You want to launch a pilot? No. You want to revamp the intake procedure? No. That's because it's a lot less risky to maintain the status quo. We all know that from reading our Dilbert cartoons. Of course, the people who say no aren't wrong. There are risks involved in any decision, and if they're big ones, the person who said yes is on the hook for their job and their professional reputation. So if you want to get people to say yes to you, there's a simple formula. You have to reduce their perceived risk. In fact, ideally, you want to convince them it's riskier to say no and leave things as they are than it would be for them to try something new. Here's how to do it. First, you need to frame the existing situation. Let's say you want to simplify a process in your organization. They may be thinking, well, it's worked fine for the past 10 years, why change it? You need to ramp up the urgency and show them the costs. Gather data about the inefficiencies in the process. How long does it take to fill out the forms? How many times a day or a week are they filled out? How many man-hours is that per year? Based on an average salary, how much is that costing your company? If you can make the case that eliminating 2 questions from the form, which saves 5 minutes each time, could result in a multi-million-dollar annual savings, your boss is probably going to start listening. Next, you need to demonstrate your credibility. Remember, you don't just have to persuade them. You also need to give them ammunition to defend you when they present the idea to their superiors. So think about your points of credibility and try to assemble at least 2 or 3. For instance, one point of credibility is the amount of research you've done. You didn't just come up with this idea one morning in the shower and then told your boss. Instead, you've spent weeks researching the best practices of more than 25 competitors to see what they're doing and how you can apply that knowledge to your firm. Another point of credibility is your own background. If you have a credential like an MBA or a professional certification, this is a good time to make sure your boss remembers that. For instance, you could casually throw in something like, this situation reminded me of a case study we tackled in my MBA program, so I started researching it further. You're showcasing your expertise and using it to benefit your company. Finally, another possible point of credibility is having actual data. So if the change would feel big and risky to your boss if it were implemented on a wide scale, propose a small pilot, something time-limited and reversible. If it fails, no big deal. No one will notice. But if it's successful, you have proof, and you can leverage that to roll it out more broadly. Change is risky, let's face it. But with these steps, you can make it much safer and easier for your boss to say yes. You've probably heard the saying, you can never be a prophet in your own land. That's because even if you're amazing and knowledgeable and prophetic, people back home just think of you as Joe or Mary or Dinesh. In the last few years, you've learned and grown at your company and in your job. You have good ideas about ways to improve things and make an impact. But in order to get people to listen, you have to shake things up and get people to see you differently. That's something I cover more extensively in my book, Reinventing You. And here, I wanted to share a key tip from that book, the outside-in strategy, with you. The truth is, people are busy and overwhelmed, and they generally won't take the time to reevaluate their perceptions of you, unless they're forced to by some circumstance. And one of the best forcing mechanisms is having someone outside your immediate orbit take notice of you. Inside your company, you might just be Johnny who does marketing. But if you start to build a reputation as an expert with people outside the company, it actually increases your standing internally as well. That's because when people start talking to your colleagues, and they will, and saying, oh, you work with John? His ideas are amazing. You guys are so lucky. All of a sudden, people start to realize they have something valuable on their hands. They can't take you for granted anymore, and the power dynamic changes. They're more willing to listen and to take action on your ideas. So how can you cultivate that external reputation as a recognized expert? As I describe in my book, Stand Out, one of the best ways to do this is to start sharing your ideas publicly. That's because, at a very basic level, if you don't share your ideas, no one will know what they are, and no one will know if they're any good. But if you do put them out there, people can start to take a look and say, I like how she thinks. There's something here. We need to work with her. Now, your organization may have policies in place about things like social media usage, so it's important to be aware of what's permitted. But once you know the parameters, think broadly within them. You could start curating an interesting Twitter feed about your industry, which shows that you're up on current news and trends. You could start blogging on LinkedIn or Medium or your own site, writing about key topics in your field. That, in particular, is a great way to demonstrate your expertise, because while almost anyone can send a 140-character tweet, it takes sustained thought and discipline to craft a smart 700-word article. You could send in a proposal to speak at your next industry conference, or run for a leadership position in your professional association. You get enormous credibility from being an officer, because you were publicly chosen by your peers. But the little-known secret is that most of those roles are pretty easy to get. After all, they're not paid and people are busy. If you're willing to raise your hand and volunteer and work hard, you can probably get it. You won't start as president, but you don't need to. Having a role like membership chair can actually even be better sometimes, because it gives you a legitimate excuse to network with anyone you want to and dramatically expands your prominence in your local professional community. When you get known outside your company by sharing your ideas, the benefits redound to you inside your company as well. As your profile rises, you become more respected and more influential. The TED Conference, Technology, Entertainment, and Design, has become a worldwide phenomenon. These days, almost everyone has seen videos of popular TED Talks. But why did it become such a big deal? And what can you learn from it? Here are 3 key lessons to keep in mind so that you can think like a TED speaker to become more influential. First, find the personal connection. Lots of people can go up on stage and recite facts, and some can do it pretty compellingly. But what sets the most popular TED Talks apart is the speaker's personal connection to what they're talking about. There's a reason they picked this topic or got into this line of work, and it gives everything they say a depth and emotional resonance. You might say, that's great if you're curing cancer, but my job doesn't work like that. But if you look deep enough, you can probably find a personal connection that's meaningful, whether it relates to you or someone who uses your company's products or services. Maybe you're creating a vastly improved new cleaning product so parents can spend more time with their kids instead of doing housework. Or maybe you're helping process insurance claims faster, which helps people get their car fixed so they can get back to work and won't lose their job. Find that meaningful connection when you're explaining why whatever you're proposing matters. Next, think about creating a story bank. Humans are biologically hardwired to respond to and remember stories much longer than we can remember facts. So for every key point you make, think of a few relevant stories in advance. That enables you to pull them out when the time is right, so you can be especially effective, targeted, and persuasive. Take a look at the exercise file to help you create your own story bank. For instance, if you're trying to get your company to expand into the Brazilian market, you could have stories on hand about a company in another industry that went into Brazil and did really well, or about a company that you spoke with in Brazil that's desperate for a product or service just like yours, or about a time in your company's past when it expanded into another market, let's say China, and now it's a key part of your annual revenue. These stories, deployed well, can really help you make your case and become more influential. Finally, consider slowing down. When I interviewed John Bates, a prominent coach for many TED and TEDx speakers, he told me that he almost always advises his clients to speak more slowly. There's a human tendency when you're nervous to try to speed things up and try to get the words out faster. That's a mistake, and something you should work to control, because neuroscience research shows that people are viewed as less knowledgeable and less trustworthy if they speak too fast. Instead, keep a measured pace, and people will be more likely to tune in, listen, pay attention, and hopefully say yes. TED has been sweeping the world, with good reason. The best TED Talks exemplify key principles of effective communication, and we can all learn from them. So how can you be influential if you don't really feel like an expert? It's one thing if you have a PhD in a subject and can out-credential other people. But for most of us, me included, that's not the case. Sometimes your authority can come from other roots, like having worked in your company for a number of years, or simply from being trusted by others because you do good work. But in many cases, we may still find ourselves in situations where we're trying to be persuasive, but may not feel we have enough expertise to serve as ammunition. What then? In that case, the smart move is to borrow others' expertise to help strengthen your case. Here's how to do it. Let's say you think it'd be a good idea for your company to pilot a new initiative. Let's say it's something about drones. You might have no experience in that area. Now, your idea could be amazing, but people often feel the need for reassurances from experts. So the first step is doing big picture research. Who are the leading thinkers about drones, and what have they written? Get their books and read them so you're familiar with their arguments and the arguments of their opponents so you can respond effectively. You never want to be caught flat-footed when someone questions your assertions. You want to be prepared and have heard of and be familiar with the leading players in the field. Next, do current events research. Thank goodness there's no more microfiche. These days, it's as simple as a web search. What are the key news stories that have happened in the past few years related to drones? What examples will be on people's minds? Are there projects you can cite that are relevant? If a rival company is exploring a similar initiative, that's a good reason for your company to jump on the bandwagon so it doesn't get eclipsed. And if a company in a different industry has had success, you could make the case that the lessons are transferable, and your company can get a competitive advantage if it applies them before anyone else in your field. Finally, do a little academic research. That might sound intimidating, because the truth is most academic writing is boring and impenetrable, but the insights behind it are often invaluable, so that little bit of extra effort can set you apart. You don't need to comb through academic journals, though if you want extra points, your local reference librarian can show you how to do it. But anyone can find studies that are relevant to your field or your proposal with links to the source material cited in credible publications like the Harvard Business Review. Or you can do an online search for your topic of interest and add the word study or research to it, and oftentimes links to academic papers will come up. Make sure, of course, that the research has been done by people at credible institutions, but if it has, it gives additional heft and validity to your arguments. The academic world and the business world often, unfortunately, don't really talk to each other. If you can break down that barrier, you get the benefit of their research and credibility. Even if you don't feel like an expert on the topic you're advocating for, with a little bit of effort, you can borrow the expertise of others to help you make an effective case. It would be so nice if all our ideas were welcomed with open arms and everything was smooth sailing. But as anyone who has spent any time in a corporate environment can tell you, that is sadly not the case. Even if almost everyone loves your ideas, there is always going to be someone who's a naysayer. It can't be done. That's not how we do things here. That'll never work. You know the drill. So how can you disarm the naysayers in your midst? One solution actually comes from Ben Franklin, of all people. In a famous example, he had a difficult relationship with someone, and he transformed it when he went to that person and asked to borrow one of the person's books. Now, why did that work? There are a few factors at play. First, as humans, we have a natural tendency to try to avoid people we have a contentious relationship with. That, of course, only exacerbates the problem, because it's easier for us to turn them into villains in our mind, and vice versa, if we're not actually seeing them or interacting with them. So Franklin making the effort to reach out defeated that tendency. Second, he explained that the reason that he wanted to borrow the book was that he respected the person's taste and knew the book would be valuable for him to read. Even if you kind of hate your naysayer, there's got to be something good about them. Strive to find it. Make an effort to identify a quality that you actually do admire, as Ben Franklin did with this guy's literary taste, and use that as a way of giving them an honest compliment. People can smell a fake compliment a mile away, and it does more harm than good because you seem like you're sucking up or currying favor. But if it's true, and they know it's true, it can serve as a gesture of goodwill. Third and finally, when Ben Franklin's rival loaned him the book, and he did, because it's a pretty minor ask, it triggered something that the eminent psychologist Robert Cialdini calls the commitment and consistency principle of influence. Franklin's rival looked at his action, he was doing a favor for Ben Franklin, and it actually began to reshape how he thought of himself. He began to think of himself as someone who does favors for Ben Franklin, meaning he must actually like the guy more than he thought he did. Our thoughts shape our actions, but our actions shape our thoughts as well. And because of the commitment and consistency principle, this gentleman became more likely, after that small initial gesture, to do more favors for Ben Franklin in the future. It changed the dynamic and transformed their relationship into a positive one. If you're facing chronic naysayers at work, try to shake things up. If you can change the dynamic of your relationship, whether by giving an honest compliment or asking for a small favor, you give them a reason to revisit how they think about you. Their opinion about you or the ideas you espouse may be frozen in time in a matter of habit and reaction. Altering how you relate can help to reset that relationship and hopefully create a more collaborative connection. No matter how good your ideas are, it doesn't really matter if you can't convince other people to listen to them. Learning how to be persuasive is one of the most valuable skills you can cultivate because it enhances your ability to execute on literally everything else you do. If you haven't already, take the time to dive in and fill out the worksheets accompanying this course. When you use these strategies, you can become immediately more persuasive with people you meet, and you can change and upgrade how your existing network sees you, and that makes you more influential and effective at your job. Shoot me any comments or questions at doryclark.com, and good luck.